So far, the Minnesota Vikings have not signed a single offensive line. Since free agency, our Vikings offensive line has only gotten worse. Losing Dakota Dozier actually improves our offensive line. Outside of that, cutting Riley Reiff, maybe losing Brett Jones. We now have to use Ezra Cleveland at left tackle, and that's a big red flag. Now, I hate to say it, but it is a red flag because we have not seen anything from Ezra Cleveland yet that made him look like a left tackle at all. Now, yes, he was drafted to be a left tackle, but if he doesn't work out, I mean, you can play him as a guard. You can play Rashad Hill at left tackle. So that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is who's going to be our left and right guard. We have the tackles down. Garrett Bradbury is going to continue to play at center. Now, obviously, Bradbury has not done a good job protecting for Kirk Cousins, but has done an excellent job blocking for Dalvin Cook. Actually, Garrett Bradbury is Dalvin Cook's second best blocker and has been since we've drafted him. Obviously, the best blocker is C.J. Ham, but Garrett Bradbury has been the second best blocker for Dalvin Cook, but hasn't protected well for Kirk Cousins. But the question is, who's going to be our offensive guards? I would have loved to see the Vikings sign Joe Thuney. Instead, they moved the money to sign defensive players. I would have liked to see the Vikings sign maybe Gabe Jackson, and you could also sign some wide receivers. I would have loved to see that happen as well. Obviously, that didn't happen. Vikings moved all their money to defense. Now, yes, defense is what held the Vikings back the most in the 2020 season, but that was due to injuries. That was not due to lack of talent. Yes, there was lack of talent on the secondary, on the cornerback position, but that really had to do with lack of experience. So really, the Vikings didn't need to invest this much money into defense, is what I'm saying. They could have invested this into the offensive line, add more depth at the wide receiver position. Because when you have a player like Adam Thielen, say Adam Thielen gets injured again, we don't have anybody stepping into his spot. BZ Johnson, you can try to use him again. We don't know how our tight ends are going to look. Now, I'm excited to see what our tight ends can do because when Kyle Rudolph got injured, they did perform pretty well. But once again, we don't have Kyle Rudolph, who was our best receiver in the red zone. Not this last year because they didn't utilize him very much. Years before that, he was our best receiver in the red zone. So let's take a look at our current offensive line for the Vikings. Our current offensive line for the Vikings. Now, this is how I think the offensive line will look for this 2021 season if it started right now. We would have Ezra Cleveland at left tackle, Rashad Hill at left guard, Garrett Bradbury at center, Drew Samia at right guard, Brian O'Neill at right tackle. Now, Rashad Hill, I wouldn't want to actually start at guard. I would like to see him as a backup tackle. But if the season started today, the Vikings would have no choice but to use Rashad Hill as a guard. Now, this is his, I guess Rashad Hill's initial position is actually a guard. But I would like to see him as a backup tackle because that's what he's done very well at in the NFL. So if the Vikings started right now, obviously you don't want Drew Samia starting at right guard. We all know how that went. We don't want Rashad Hill starting at left guard. We need guards. And I'm not very high on Rick Spielman drafting a guard. Now, yes, the Vikings can use that 14th overall pick and draft a pretty good guard. Vikings can maybe draft a guard in the third round. But it's not going to happen. If the Vikings do draft a guard, we know it's not going to work. When has it worked? When has the Vikings ever drafted a guard in recent memory? When has Rick Spielman ever drafted a guard and it's actually worked? I'm not very comfortable with that happening at all. And that's why I wanted to see the Vikings look to guard in free agency as their number one priority. Look to guard in free agency. Just get an already developed offensive guard, give him whatever money he wanted, and this would really help out our Vikings offensive line because interior protection for Kirk Cousins is very important. And it's where the Vikings suffered last year. Yes, it wasn't the biggest thing. Defense obviously held the Vikings back the most due to injuries and lack of experience on the secondary. But when you look at overall, the Vikings offense should have been a lot better than it was. It should have been a lot better. And it has to do with interior protection for Kirk Cousins. Because Brian O'Neill had a good season. Riley Reiff had a good season. Our tackles did pretty good. It was on that interior side of the line where the Vikings allowed way too many pressures. So I'm not very happy with how the Vikings have handled off free agency so far, as I would have liked to see Joe Thuney come in. Vikings easily could have got Joe Thuney. Now, I understand he's making a lot of money with the Kansas City Chiefs, and he'd probably rather stay with the Kansas City Chiefs because obviously they're a better team and he wants to chase the ring. But when you look at it, Vikings could have gave him more money. They could have maybe even brought in Gabe Jackson. Vikings could have done something for Kirk Cousins to protect him on the interior side of the line instead of investing all of their money to add players to the defense. And then let's take a look at if the Vikings are looking for an offensive guard right now. These are my top 5 offensive guards that are available right now. You have Lane Taylor, who's very injury prone. Now, Lane Taylor is a great offensive guard, but he's very injury prone, 32 years old. Should the Vikings bring him in? I mean, he did play with the Packers. I don't know if that's really going to help out the Vikings a lot, but if he can stay healthy, that would be a great signing for the Vikings. Once again, Vikings don't have very much cap space anyways. Vikings are only $1 million over the cap. Danielle Hunter is demanding a pay cut. I mean, not a pay cut, pay raise, I guess. The Vikings basically have no cap space. Nothing to invest into the guard position. Vikings can look for a nobody guard, and then you have Try Turner, Zach Fulton, Nick Easton, John Miller. Like, there's other players you can sign. It's just not as good of a free agent guard class as it should have been. As it was 1 week ago where the Vikings could have signed Joe Thuney, could have signed Gabe Jackson. Vikings could have got a very good offensive guard. Maybe even signing, there is Eric Fisher still available. Now, Vikings don't have the money to sign Eric Fisher, but if they did sign Eric Fisher, then you could play Ezra Cleveland as a left guard. That would help out the Vikings so much. That would be such a relief to actually have. So if the Vikings can't sign an offensive guard, now they're looking for Forrest Lamp right now. I don't even know why you would want to do that. We're going to end up probably bringing back Dakota Dozier at this point. The Vikings have no money for offensive guards. So let's take a look at if the Vikings were to draft an offensive guard in the first round. If the Vikings can draft Rashawn Slater at the 14th overall pick, offensive tackle out of Northwestern, I'd be totally fine with that. Rashawn Slater is going to play as a guard. Now, yes, he's the second best offensive tackle or the second best offensive lineman in this draft class. And his position is offensive tackle because he was the best offensive lineman in his college. I think he's going to play as a left guard. Now here, you could trade down. Trading down is a big option. I mean, at the 14th overall pick, there is a lot of players that are expected to fall down where teams can trade up and draft those players. Vikings could trade down where they can draft Christian Darrisaw, they can draft Elijah Vera Tucker, or Tevin Jenkins, all of which would start on our offensive line. So how can the Vikings fix their offensive line? You have to draft an offensive line in the first round now. You can still go for defense in the first round, but you can't just dismiss the fact that offensive line is the biggest need right now. And this is not going to fix itself. Now the Vikings have to draft another offensive lineman in the first round. You can draft an offensive tackle or a left tackle in the first round. Now, you either draft Rashawn Slater at 14 or you trade down. Because Rashawn Slater coming in at 14 will be our starting left guard, and then Vikings can bring in some player on a one-year deal at right guard, and then probably get someone else after that. This is how the Vikings should and will rebuild this offensive line. You can draft an offensive tackle in the first round as well, a new left tackle, and then start Ezra Cleveland at left guard. That's not the safest route, but that is another possibility. So this is how I think the Vikings need to fix their offensive line, because it is the biggest need, and it's been going into free agency, and it is even more now. So let me know what y'all think. How do you think this is all going to go down? How do you think the Vikings will have to fix this offensive line? Because it's not going to fix itself.